Last week, the news broke that the Trump administration will terminate the Affordable Care Act's cost-sharing payments, further destabilizing the already fragile exchanges on the eve of open enrollment. Although state regulators and insurers have taken steps to protect themselves, the abrupt end of the cost-sharing payments will have unpredictable and unhappy consequences. Let's discuss. This is Healthcare Triage News. Special thanks to Nick Bagley, friend of the show and healthcare law expert extraordinaire, without whom this episode wouldn't be possible. Some background. The Affordable Care Act provides two kinds of subsidies to help low and middle income people pay for insurance in the exchanges. Premium subsidies to defray the cost of premiums for people making less than 4 times the poverty level. For those who make less than that, cost-sharing reductions help cover the cost of deductibles and other out-of-pocket spending. Although they serve similar goals, the two subsidies function in different ways. The premium subsidies are refundable tax credits that go to individuals. They're administered through the tax code. For cost-sharing reductions, the ACA requires insurers to cut their lowest-income customers a break on their out-of-pocket spending. In turn, the statute says the federal government will reimburse insurers for doing that. Here's the catch. The Constitution says that, and I'm quoting, "No money shall be drawn from the Treasury, but in consequence of appropriations made by law." Under the persnickety rules governing appropriations law, it's not enough for a statute to order the government to make a payment. Congress must adopt a law that specifically appropriates the money to make that payment. And while the Affordable Care Act does link the premium subsidies to an existing appropriation, it's silent about the cost-sharing reductions. Some years back, the House of Representatives sued the Obama administration for continuing to make the cost-sharing payments in the absence of an appropriation. Although Nick still doesn't think that the House has standing to sue, he thought its legal argument was sound. The money hadn't been appropriated. The Trump administration apparently agrees, and is using that as a pretext to terminate the payments. So what happens now? Lawsuits, lawsuits, and more lawsuits. Right out of the gate, Nick thinks it's likely that the 16 states that have intervened in the ongoing litigation will seek an immediate injunction from the DC Circuit to keep the cost-sharing payments flowing. The states may also file a separate lawsuit in district court seeking the same relief. He doesn't know if either gambit will work, but the states will certainly try. If the Trump administration successfully brushes back those efforts, here's what will likely happen. Even without an appropriation, the ACA creates an entitlement to cost-sharing reductions. Health plans can vindicate that entitlement before the Court of Federal Claims. Payment would then come from the Judgment Fund, a permanently appropriated fund to pay court judgments where payment is not otherwise provided for. The question is thus not whether the government will pay, but when. This year, cost-sharing payments have amounted to about $7 billion. Unless Congress moves to repeal or amend the Affordable Care Act, and good luck with that, although it looks a little more likely these last few days, obligations of similar size will accrue through 2018 and beyond. In other words, we may be about to witness the largest lawsuits dollar-wise in United States history. What's more, Nick and other experts think these lawsuits are viable. We've already seen a couple of district courts grant multi-million-dollar judgments in litigation over risk corridor payments. And the risk corridor cases raise some tricky questions about what sorts of promises the federal government has made to insurers. The cost-sharing cases won't. On the law, they're relatively straightforward. Congress could always appropriate the money, and again, that's looking more likely in these last few days. That would staunch the bleeding and restore some confidence to the rattled insurance markets. Or, alternatively, Congress could prohibit the Judgment Fund from paying out any judgment in cost-sharing litigation, although that would amount to a government default in its obligations. The damage to the government's reputation will be severe, as Craig Garthwaite and Nick have discussed in a New York Times op-ed. If Congress doesn't act, it's really the worst of all worlds. To compensate for the loss of cost-sharing payments, insurers will have to raise their premiums for silver plans. Because premium subsidies are keyed to the price of silver plans, the size of the subsidies will increase along with the rise in premiums. And because many more people are eligible for premium subsidies than for cost-sharing reductions, total federal outlays will actually increase. So, taxpayers will have to pay increased premium subsidies at the front end. Then they'll also pay the cost-sharing money through litigation at the back end. It's a financial bath, and for no good reason other than sheer political cussedness. As Nick said, what a stupid, profligate, and unnecessary mess. Hard to top that. Sometimes talking about drugs and sex education and health insurance aren't advertising friendly. and making those important videos could actually hurt our bottom line. Healthcare Triage is made possible in part, therefore, by our supporters at Patreon. The support we receive from our patrons at Patreon allows us to keep making those kinds of videos without worrying about ad revenue. So thanks to all of them, and particularly thanks to our Surgeon Admiral Sam and research associates Joe Sevitz and Joshua Crow. If you'd like to support the show, we'd really appreciate it. You can go to patreon.com/healthcaretriage. While we're asking you to do stuff, please consider subscribing to the show, consider buying some Healthcare Triage merch as the holidays come up at hctmerch.com, and I've got a book coming out November 7th, The Bad Food Bible, available anywhere you'd buy books, and I'd really appreciate your picking up a copy.